Well, the blockade is certainly intended and designed to put pressure on the federal government to take a leadership role on the issue of murdered and missing women by supporting the formulation of a national action plan and ultimately calling an inquiry into the current tragedy that's unfolding across Canada. Yeah, the recent numbers show 824 murdered Aboriginal people, 825 now with Loretta Saunders, but 825 murdered Indigenous women, and that occurs from coast to coast, community to community. Everybody's been touched by this tragedy. The federal government's been reluctant to take any type of positive position on this. They've talked about the creation of a taking specific action as opposed to having an inquiry. That's the line that they take, but really it's impossible to have a formulated plan that's effective, that can be implemented without having a full understanding of the complexity of the problem and having a plan in place that could be done through a national inquiry. Well, RCMP aren't necessarily the ones to engage in an inquiry. I think RCMP would be probably the topic of a big part of the inquiry and their involvement. Human Rights Watch put out a report back in the fall that documenting dozens of instances where RCMP were using their position to sexually assault and rape Aboriginal women in the communities, and then threatening to have those women disappear if they ever made a complaint or spoke to anybody about it. And that report was presented by an internationally recognized group, the Human Rights Watch, and the Prime Minister sloughed it off and said, well, if people have a complaint, then they should step forward and make that complaint. And that's not dealing with the issue and not understanding the issue. And people know, in communities, First Nations women and girls are living in fear. Everyone's subject to abduction, rape, torture, murder, and when that happens to an individual, then they're portrayed or the aspersions are cast by the Prime Minister that people are engaged in the sex trade, and therefore their behavior results in this type of thing from time to time. But a recent report that was prepared by Marianne Pierce documented that only 20% of the 825 murdered people had ever in their lives ever been engaged in any type of risky behavior that could lead to that. So to suggest that women are only being killed because of their involvement in the sex trade is completely inaccurate, and it's a ridiculous statement. So consequently, based on the way that he's carried that message and put that message out to Canadian society, when someone loses a loved one, either through a violent crime or that goes missing and presumed to be dead from a violent crime, the family is then forced to come out and have to defend the character and integrity of the person. So, oftentimes when your daughter, your mother gets killed, you have to come out and say, well, she wasn't involved in the sex trade, she wasn't a prostitute, she wasn't a drug addict, and it's another insult on a horrific situation.
It's a double insult.
Yeah. Hey, see you guys. I certainly have neighbors. I know one family, a young fella, and he lost his sister. She was found raped and murdered, tortured, found in a dumpster in British Columbia, and she was a family member. In my immediate family, no, but certainly within our community, people are aware of instances. There's Most people associate this with a downtown Vancouver east side thing, and really in the province of Ontario there's 100 murdered women. In the province where Loretta Saunders was killed, there's 100 murdered women, and it goes province by province, community by community, and nobody's exempt from it.
But Loretta was which province?
She was from New Brunswick. Yeah. Like the support for this particular issue is it's overwhelming in the community. It's supported in through the broadest parts of the community. Last night when we came in, we had 80 men that carried out the initial shutdown of this. I've never, I guess in the 23 years that I've been active in bringing issues forward, I've never saw the level of commitment or involvement by the community in any greater way, and I think that's just reflective of the magnitude of the issue and the seriousness of the issue, and the personal grief and sadness that we all share in the issue, and we've just translated that into commitment and resolve, and with the mindset that we want to see this through to some proper conclusion and bring justice to the sisters.